Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted Nkantu, the living mummy from Marvel Crisis Protocol. It's the spooky season, so why not? As a base color for our mummy, we're going to use a light gray primer, since we're going to be using some contrast paints that works best on a light undercoat. So I spray painted everything in gray cere. Now the first layer is going to be a contrast paint skeleton horde. It's a nice brown contrast paint. I thinned it down just a little bit, just not to make it too dark, and it's going to be visible in the recesses mainly. Now this particular mummy has some attributes, some cloth hanging around his waist, some bands on his lower arms. But the rest is going to be mummy skin. Is that a word? Mummy bandages, mummy wrapping. It's a mummy gift pack. Now make sure to let that dry before continuing to our next stage. Now here we can see it all dried up, and we're going to be painting some Dorn Yellow mixed with some Palette Witch Flesh to pick out the top part of the bandages, so the parts that are the most visible, that are reflecting the most light. So imagine where your light source is coming from and start painting from there. Now I'm just picking out tiny details, since those rags don't really have to be neat and clean and evenly spread color-wise, so you can go freely here. But again, leave some shady areas as they are and just focus on those top parts. That really gives some depth to the model and creates an overall realistic effect, as far as realistic mummies go. The next step is an extreme highlight with pure Palette Witch Flesh. And just focus on smaller areas than you did before to create a transition from dark to bright. So focus on the knuckles of the hands, the fingers, some bandages that are sticking out, the tip of the nose for example. The face of the mummy you can more or less approach like you would normally highlight a face. So the nose, the eyebrows, the mouth adds to the realism of this living mummy. And that's it for the bandages. Now I repainted the cloth with gray cere. If you haven't done already, I spray painted it, but I kind of touched it in the painting process of the bandages, so make sure that was nice and clear, as we're going to be using a contrast paint over it. And I wanted to give him some spooky appearance, so I used Nighthaunt Gloom, as it's a nice eerie blue that works really well with this miniature, and it keeps the cloth kind of spooky gray. The sash in the middle and around his waist I painted with corn red. Nice and bright red, and that gives a beautiful contrast with the previously used colors. We're going to darken it down a little bit further on, but also giving it some extremely bright highlights, just to make it really stand out. Now there are some gold or metal pieces on his body. I'm painting it with Gehenna's gold. It's a nice coppery look, which I used on the staff, the buckle on the middle of his sash. Well, basically those are it. There are some bands on his lower arms. I'm going to be painting that with a different color later on. Then with some dried bark I painted the wrappings around the staff. I imagine that would be kind of a leathery thing, some straps going around it. So make sure you get a nice coverage there. There's a tiny bar above his hand, and I also included the bands waving on the top the staff. The wrist I wanted to give him more of a coppery look, so I used brass scorpion. It gives this nice, well, brass copper look to it, and it's a bit different than the staff, so just to have some different colors in there. And then the next step, we're going to be highlighting the gold, and for that I'm using Retributor armor. As it's more of a yellowy gold look, it adds some shine to the staff. I'm focusing only on the front for this part, and of course the buckle on his belt as well. I kind of used it like an edge highlight, so imagine where your light source is, make sure that the reflection is most there. I also used the same color, the Retributor armor, on the sides, the very edges of his wrist band, just to give it kind of a gold trim on the beginning and the end. I always find it nice to use some different colors for tiny details, as it makes the model look more interesting. And I'm repeating this process now with Liberator Gold, which is again a brighter variant of the one we used before. And now I'm only adding some fine lines here and there as if in an extreme reflection or some kind of shimmer coming off this staff. Tiny edge highlights here and there. Then it's time to wash. I'm using Agrex Earthshade to add some shades here and there to the leather parts on the staff mostly. Just go nuts there. You can do a heavy wash because you want those darker lower areas to remain dark in the future process. And I also used this Agrex Earthshade on some of the gold parts. Also the wristbands, I gave a shade of this Agrex Earthshade just to tone them down a little bit, and that way the gold rims on the very end and the beginning, they stand out a little bit more. And it gives it an aged look. Now with Mournfang Brown I'm adding some fine lines, leaving the deeper areas nice and dark. So just as a tiny edge highlight on the grip of the staff, It gives it like a leather strap look. Don't forget to do bands on the top. And we're going to repeat the process with some scrag brown, but this time only focusing on the front, so, or at least the part where your light source would be. The trick here is to hit the exact same area as you painted before, so you get a transition from dark to brighter to brightest. So take your time when doing so. The result is really, really nice. Next is highlighting this sash with corn red mixed with some palette witch flesh, which gives a nice pinkish look. There are some tiny edges on the sash part that's going around his waist. Try and add some detail there. Next up is the tiny diamond in the middle. I'm using Cantor blue to give it a nice overall blue coat. Now we're going to be adding some shine to it. For that I'm making kind of a moon-like shape, like a half moon circle shape with temple guard blue on the top part of this diamond, as if it were reflecting light from above. So the bottom part stays nice and dark, the top part is more bright. And I'm adding some tiny dot of extreme reflection with palette witch flesh. So just one dot of reflection, what makes it look, it gives it like a diamond or glassy look, like it's reflecting light. It's a very simple effect, but with a great effect. Carbro Crimson I used to shade the sash we painted before, just as a last detail. And I'm then using some palette witch flesh because there is some teeth showing. Figures, of course. If you're a mummy, you're dead. What remains is your skeleton and your teeth. So they're intact. He's smiling. And it's not just the teeth. I'm also painting the eyes, the inside of the eyes. I made sure that the eye sockets, if we can speak of those, are black, or at least as dark as possible, and painted in some eyes like you see here. And also his grin, his teeth are showing a little bit. Some black around it makes those eyes really stand out. And now it's time for the base and the magic swirl, the spooky thing he's pulling from the ground. Some Bad Moon Yellow I used on the more or less the entire thing going upwards here. And I'm using contrast paints, which I'm going to be blending together while still wet. So maybe check this part of the video till the end, just to be ready when you try this. The next step is I'm using some Tesseract Glow, but I'm kind of blending it with the yellow. And the fun thing about these contrast paints is that they blend really nice. That's why I love working with them. It gives a great opportunity to really smoothly make transitions between colors. And it's especially useful with these kind of effects we're looking for. So as you can see here, I'm basically working at it like as if it were a shade. I'm adding some striking scorpion green here as a final step in my color mixture, and also blending it with those previous colors. And the way I'm doing this is that I want the top to be the brightest and work the greens towards it more or less. But it can be swirly, and feel free to try something here. There's no real right or wrong. What I wanted to have is a transition of yellow to bright green to darker green. And the darker parts I focused mainly on the bottom and the bottom side of the swirl. And the upper sides, or the upper visible sides, I kept brighter, as if it were basically like a shade. So also added this Bad Moon Yellow to his hand as kind of a reflection. You can extend it a little bit to his wrist if you want, but make sure to water it down because it's going to be less strong the further away you get from the light source. I'm doing the same with the Tesseract Glow, so add some greens to his hand. And also try and do that while still wet, so you get a nice blend, a mixture of colors. I'm also using this Tesseract Glow to add some glow to his eyes. Give him nice green eyes. And then it's time for the base, and for this I'm using contrast paints as well. Creed Camo as a first color, which I'm using as sort of a border, a trim all around the miniature. And the inside we're going to give more of a sandy look. Now, most of these Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures have very boring bases and you have to make something out of it yourself. But this monster pack has some unique bases for all their characters, so make sure to exploit that and make something beautiful from it. We'll always do that, but what, you know what I mean. So I'm kind of wet blending again some Dark Oath Flesh as a sand tone, which is nice and bright, and a nice contrast to every color we painted before. So I'm kind of mixing those colors together at the edges just to have an even flow, like a natural flow of color from green to brown. Now there are some scarabs running around his feet, which is a nice tiny detail, which I repainted with Grey Seer because I had touched it with the Dark Oath I used before, just to make him plain again, and we're going to use a contrast paint on those as well. So pick out those tiny bugs. And lastly, we're going to be using this contrast paint, Aethermatic Blue, to paint those scarabs. And you can do 2 layers to make them darker if you want. Make sure to let that dry in between. And you get some beautiful scarabs there. And here's our finalized Nkantu the Living Mummy from Marvel Crisis Protocol, the Monsters Unleashed pack. I really enjoyed painting this guy. It's a lot of fun. It's always fun to paint with colors, with magical swirls and stuff like this. And I hope this video was of any help to you guys. And if it was, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!